Thanks, Andrew. Thanks everyone again for joining us, and hello for your part with this conversation. So, with just to give a brief synopsis for everyone who's on our session, with the state of PubTech, I'm going to be more talking about the industry sort of background, what's going on a little bit, and we want to, Khalil and I, when we spoke about this session together, we wanted to bring this as a point to leave you with an actionable step that you can take to move forward as well, as much as these changes have happened. So, um, just to keep you on your hooks, Khalil's going to be going through a framework, a specific framework that a user framework that he's been adopting in the conversation, and we'll leave it at that for now. But let's jump straight into the session. So let's look back. If you want to compare sort of I mean, the main point of reference, and I think there's a lot of resources and articles online about trends. We've covered our own mini series as well, but if we look at the benchmark of the Reuters research piece in the beginning of the year, they had like 8 key points about what was going to happen throughout the year. So I've put here some of the key points here, and just wanted to balance check and see whether or not those things are happened or haven't happened. So, has there been a shift to audio and video? Yes, there has, 100%. As more as more of that has become discoverable, indexable, which we'll go through a little bit more in detail. A lot of that has definitely been continuing to shift, and new gen audiences have contributed to that as well. Has generative AI brought a breakthrough year for AI media publishing? Not so much 100%, but indirectly it has. To break it down, like there's actually a study as well that I found today that a solution provider called Originally.ai, they did the analysis, and they found that from the 135 high traffic sites they've analyzed, 65% of them have already adopted AI in their content. So some of them have incorporated summaries, some of them have actually done blatant production of that content using AI, generative AI. And yes, there's been a lot of flack for that. But I think where I see indirectly is that it's gotten people to think more about productivity, efficiencies. It's also triggered social search to become more on a level. So it's allowed social search to become more of a level playing field with other channels. So social search, referring to with YouTube, with search itself, tapping into social media and making that all encompassing. It's definitely starting to make a leeway or a headway towards that. Have tech platforms suffered hubris? Yes, they have, because you can see that the likes of Facebook, as everyone knows, we've all been seeing this, that the declining of referral traffic has been continually going down. And instead of innovating a little bit on those platforms, I mean, because of the proliferation, I mean, particularly with Meta, the proliferation of their different products have resulted in them just to focus on the ones that have been working and not sort of cater to the other ones. So, and also we've seen the likes of Twitter with more of the direct approach that they're trying to take with the Chinese platform, the comparison to that, trying to make that more of a all-in-one platform. A lot of them are just biding their time to develop their own and continue to develop their own ecosystems, whether or not it's a benefit or not to us or not. So that's still happening. That's resulting in frustrations with publishers as they continue to try to see these new products, how they're going to continue to shift towards creating products that cater towards the audiences that are on those own platforms. So that's still happening, unfortunately. Is there a premium inventory and subscriber value optimism that we saw in the beginning of the year? No, but there's a lot of resilience. So what I mean by that is that when I was also in the beginning of the year working at the publishing show in London, a lot of people were talking about how, besides there being reader fatigue, they're going to be more loyal audiences that are going to be willing to purchase a lot more for particular items. They're going to also publishers will offering a lot more different options with ad inventory to create premium options that would then increase the overall average value size. But if ad budgets are cut, then that also impacts the impact that publishers have towards creating and commanding more premium. So I guess that there has been resilience in that. Longer term relationships have prevailed, but in the shorter term there has been some more shorter cuts, particularly as there's been the concerns about recession and inflation and economic macro trends. But let's look at the key three trends. I like the power of three because it helps bring things into more perspective. But what has really come about from mid to end of this year that's become more obvious that I think that hasn't been really discussed in many other places in the media, including in other media publications. The first thing is privacy tech. It has also come to age. In the background, we've had a lot of consistent pushback on the timelines with Google and Chrome with depreciating third-party cookies, but they now have a clear timeline in that by the end of this year, beginning of next year, they're going to start testing to depreciate the third-party cookies, and then they're going to commit to actually removing them. And that's actually coming towards being able to develop ad tech through API on various components that instead of having ad tech providers and pub tech providers own that data, it's actually going to be stored within the browser, and then it's going to be passed through to us, the publishers, to then have that anonymized and being compliant with various legal frameworks like GDPR and so forth. So you can see that the signals around web spam, content ads, and cross-site boundaries in terms of countries and how these various components are going to become the criteria to evaluate a more safe and private web, which I think is going to be a key platform to then maybe realizing, the utopia of Web 3.0. So you can see here that most of it's already coming into availability, and many of the partners, ad tech and pub tech partners, already have adopted these technologies in their ad tech stack. So please understand that so that you can ask those same questions to your third-party providers. The second trend is the YouTubeification of everything. I think people have taken an understanding that, because of YouTube, TikTok being so popular, that everything we were doing is being copied, being influenced by them. But TikTok is seeing the longer term game here. On the right hand corner, you can see here that there was a recent article a few days ago, actually, from the information sharing that TikTok is continuing to experiment with having longer form videos. There's two key reasons for this. YouTube has a couple of years ago realized the intimate in-person format that they have with how people were so much gamifying the algorithms to get more viewerships, and then people tweaking the content formats for that. So there's a lot more maturation for that, despite shorts and stuff not having a lot more monetization yet. And so TikTok sees the potential in that, because also they're also trying to compete for their space and share of desktop and platform searches, because now that Google has incorporated them in the search results, decided to incorporate them, naturally they want to become more visible, and also realizing as well that it's not going to be the same way a long time ago where people actually are going to spend hours reading a book or text. People are literally spending time to produce videos for those same things and watch it for long hours and periods as well. So that's the YouTube has impacted in many facets of our pop culture and our way of life. And I think that's TikTok is actually continuing to take the long-term game into taking their share rather than the opposite. And then a shift towards topic and intent discovery, not discoverability. So everyone's been pretty much hardcore hit with the helpful content update, particularly from April towards, and then particularly more so in August. And basically search generative experience and Google Bard in terms of having a lot of those things providing the answers within the search results, whether it's whatever format it is and whatever query intent it is, has impacted traffic and the type of sites that are ranking. And I'll leave more of the nuances of that in our last session. But why I said discoverability is because AI has actually helped the search come to the same level playing field as how TikTok and YouTube and a lot of those social platforms have the recommendation engines really working well for them to continue the consumption on the website. And so for us, it's not so much to say that search is doomed and no longer going to work for us. It's actually flipping the same mindset as we have for those other channels and saying, well, okay, if I have content that's really, really good and my brand is trusted, is that going to then result into people clicking through to the website? Because there's always going to be delineation with some of the answers and then the trusted sources and sort of going through more deeper into that. So I think there's a lot there that you need to flip the mindset of, and we can talk about that a bit more afterwards. But to be more specific as well, like why are these things more important in a meta sense? Browsers are actually the catalyst of improving any tech stack and standardization of the web, and at the moment still. And I think privacy tech is the key aspect of that. So make sure that you evaluate that with your existing products and solutions. Video is having its moment, and definitely it's something that we can now more reliably utilize instead of back in the day where there was back in the day where it was more finicky and platforms then switched over the priorities. And then the final point is being able to really consider your brand building initiatives and focusing more on that, and then centering the content as your mode towards providing value to your audience is resulting them to build the trust with you, the first perspectives that you have with your content, to then result in people to then recommend you and consume your content as well. So all these are the reasons why they're important. So I'll hand it over to Khalil now with more of the reasons why some of those trends didn't work and sort of the frameworks we can move forward towards using. Over to you, Khalil.
Hi, Vai. Thanks for having me. So I should share my screen, right? Let me do this.
Yeah.
All right, you can see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so I guess I kind of want to talk a bit about, Vai presented, changes that are happening, trends that are happening maybe as well. Ultimately, I guess for us, we sort of want to take action, right? So we know those things are happening, we're seeing those things happen. So what can we do? And I know, many people think about this in different ways and have their own processes. What I tend to think is, if we can anchor everything, every decision that we make on the audiences and be valuable to those audiences, that also kind of works for us, right? So just to, I guess, take a step back, and then I'll kind of go into a framework that we've used to anchor into audiences. But just to take a step back, I think anchoring in audiences and listening to audiences and being more valuable to audiences is something that, as an industry, we need to very urgently get much better at. Those things, those 3 points on the slide is probably not going to surprise you. You've probably seen this, but there's so many proxies that are showing that as an industry, maybe we're not serving our audiences as well as we probably should. And that kind of links to all the market forces changes that we're seeing, which Barry kind of talked about a bit, because if we're not anchoring into the audiences, if we're not thinking about how to be valuable to audiences as much, it becomes, I think, quite difficult to then be able to act in an efficient and proper way when things are changing. So with that in mind, in terms of anchoring the audiences, being more valuable to audiences, I think I always kind of come back to this and can mean different things to different people, but just giving people value in whatever form, I think is the way forward. And this is something that maybe we've not been doing as much as we should. So how can we be valuable to people? Focusing on their needs, focusing on the problems they have, focusing on their interest. But I'll just kind of well, focus on the needs today, because that's the framework I want to talk about. So it's the user needs framework, right? And one of the big appeals to it is you can basically just use the model straight away. You don't necessarily need to do too much, or even any, in some cases, audience research on your end. This is a model that you can use within your newsroom that focuses your content production, but also maybe your product work going forward around needs of the audiences, so around the audiences. And the entire aim of the model, of the framework, is to be valuable to audiences by catering or serving their needs. So what is user needs? So I guess before I go into different user needs, just a bit of context about the user needs. So it kind of came out from BBC World Service. I want to say like 15 years ago or so now. But so basically they did a massive bit of research with audiences in, so many different markets that they're in. And they realized that irrespective of where people are, irrespective of the markets they're in, there were similar needs, right? So people don't just come to a news website, to a news publisher to be educated or to get the latest news. They realize that people also come for other reasons. They have other needs. So you can see Give Me Perspective is one of the other needs, for example. So people come to get challenging ideas, read about challenging ideas to broaden their horizons. People come to be motivated as well. So, they want to be inspired, they want to be able to take action. And actually on the Motivate Me one, you can potentially see how Google is now maybe moving in that direction a bit more with things like perspectives, more instruction videos, all that kind of stuff in search results as well. But this is something that, people come to news organizations for as well. And it's traditionally, in my experience, Motivate Me is one of the needs that maybe we serve the least in our newsrooms, but that's where the needs are actually quite high from audiences. And I'll show you a couple of graphs as well. But yeah, so the user needs research kind of came out from the BBC, and then I showed you 3 needs, but obviously there are more needs, and you can kind of just Google it and you can read all the different stuff as well. But this is, so why should you use user needs? Well, because it works, right? It worked at the BBC. You can see, for BBC Russia, Russian content specifically, they applied user needs, and within 5 years, they started getting, much better results, right? Because they started focusing on producing content that addresses the needs of their audiences. We did something at the Conversation. So at the Conversation, actually, we are in the process of really implementing the user needs in our newsrooms in different parts of the world. So we've got 8 or 9 newsrooms in different parts of the world. We started implementing this in the UK newsroom. So the UK newsroom now, every kind of commissioning process starts with deciding what user need we want to serve with this particular commission, with this particular article, right? And the cool thing from an editorial perspective is user need doesn't tell you what you should cover, right? So it's not going to tell you you should cover this war or you should not cover this news. This is entirely left to the to editorial. So, right, the journalists know what they need to cover. User needs only kind of gives the angle, right, and the perspective through which it could be good to cover whatever we want to cover, right? So address those needs. That's the angle to cover whatever stories. So as I said at the Conversation, one of the things that we've done with user needs is use it to really be more valuable to a young professional segment audience. And you can see, 50 to 55% greater engagement just because we started focusing on the needs of that audience, and 15 to 20% more views as well. So just 2 examples of many of how user needs framework work in different news organizations. And it's being used in, as I said, many news organizations, from Vox to The Atlantic to the New York Times, although the New York Times doesn't refer it to the user needs, but it's very similar. BuzzFeed had loads of needs as well that they had identified. But yeah, basically loads and loads of media organizations are now using user needs to be more valuable to their audiences. So TLDR, it works. So if this is appealing, if you want to learn more, again, I would encourage you to kind of Google user needs to kind of know more about it. But really getting started is also, or the ease of getting started is also one of the reasons why the user needs framework is like really so good, in my opinion. As I said earlier, you can do user research if you have the resources, if you have the capabilities to do it, and that definitely helps. But if you don't have the resources yet, or if maybe you don't want to commit to resources for audience research just yet, try just using the user needs framework, so it's the user needs 2.0 framework. What you basically need to do is, so the idea is you audit the content that you've already published. You basically match every article, or a sample, pretty large sample would be good, of your articles that you've already published, match them with the different user needs that are part of the framework. Once you do this, you can then match the user needs or attribute the user needs to whatever KPIs you are looking at, whether that's page views, whether that's proxies for engagement, conversions, whatever. But basically what you start seeing is where the value of each user need actually lies, right? So let me show you some graphs. So this is from the French newsroom, the newsroom in France of The Conversation. And you see the user needs are slightly different. So they did their user research and they came up with their own user needs. And you see the user needs here on the x-axis. So deciphering, escape, explanation, what's new, solution. Those are kind of the user needs that they're catering for. And this is basically what they did, right? So if you look at the graph on the left, for example, they matched the different user needs with page views and the number of articles that they published. So what this graph on the left is showing you is, if you look at solution, the solution need, for example, they published loads of articles, so 15 articles, but in terms of page views, not getting that much traffic, right? So from this, you can maybe argue that, well, maybe the newsroom is publishing too much solution content. Maybe it should focus instead on what's new, because what's new is getting loads of page views. Now, that's a very simplistic conclusion based on this graph, right? So it's just number of articles to page views. But when you start looking at other proxies, you can make even more informed decisions about your content strategy, right? So the graph on the left is page views, the graph on the left, on the right is time spent on page, an engagement proxy. So the more you kind of look into those things, the more you might see basically a mismatch between the content production of your newsroom and addressing the needs of the audiences. And that's the core of it here. If there is a mismatch, it probably means that we're not necessarily serving the audience's needs as much as we can. We are putting resources on over-serving some needs that maybe, the needs exist, right? But maybe they're not as high a priority for audiences as others. So that becomes really, really, that's kind of a really easy way to get going. And it will give you insight that you can act on very quickly, right? Now, one thing I should say is the most time-consuming part of this process is when you're tagging the content. So as I said, you have to go through all articles and tag the content. But SmartOcto, which is an analytics suite, they are working on an AI kind of tool that does that tagging of articles into user needs automatically. I haven't really played with it, but I think initial results are quite good. So again, that's something that you can maybe test out, and it should speed up that process quite a lot. So that's about user needs and content. But obviously, you can use user needs for projects as well. And just a very simple example here of the Imagine newsletter, the conversation, which is the climate newsletter. And you see that we did the same thing, but for the newsletters, right? So we attributed the articles published in the newsletters with the user needs, and then we compared them with OpenRate. And as you can see, Keep Me on Trend user need, we didn't publish that many articles, but OpenRate is quite high. And if we hypothesize that OpenRate is a proxy for interest or engagement, then what this graph maybe tells us is, well, maybe in the future, we should focus more on those Keep Me on Trend articles for Imagine newsletters, because those are probably the more, the need that is more valuable to the audience. So again, tag, do the graph, you get insights very quickly that you can act on. I think the slides will be shared with you, but if you want to kind of go a bit bigger, this is a kind of a template, I guess, of how you can really focus on audiences when you're thinking about content or when you're thinking about products. It includes user needs, but it puts user needs in a much wider piece of work that you can also do going forward. And finally, in addition to all those benefits of user needs, what we found at the conversation is it was really good in terms of not just the benefit to the audiences, but also internally within the newsroom. It shifted the discussion from output, so we're going to publish X number of articles, or we're going to publish Y number of articles across this topic, to more what impact do we want to have on people, right? We want to educate them, we want to give them perspective, we want to motivate them to take action. That's really about impact of our journalism. And as user needs kind of goes not just around editorial and audience, but also seeps through products, seeps through engineering, etc., it really provides a common language for the functional groups within the organization. And that, as we know, is always really helpful and helps align all the work going forward. That's it for me. Happy to take questions if we have time, but also, hit me up on LinkedIn or anywhere if you want to chat.
Perfect. Thanks, Carlo. Yeah, so probably just on time at the moment. So what we'll do is we'll pass along your detail. We'll share the deck, and if there's any questions, we'll pass along to you, or we can also loop you in the conversation. So thank you so much.